I used to believe that blood was thicker than water. I used to believe that the person who shared your childhood, your parents, your memories, would never be the one to destroy you. I was wrong. My sister didn't just betray me. She studied me like a textbook, learned every crack in my armor, and then she used that knowledge to take everything I had. This is the story of how the person who knew me best became my worst enemy, and how I spent 3 years making sure she paid for every single thing she took from me. My name is Rebecca, and I'm 34 years old. I live in a small town about an hour outside of Chicago, the same town where I grew up, where my parents still live, where everyone knows everyone and secrets don't stay buried for long. That last part turned out to be important. My sister's name is Claire, and she's 2 years younger than me. Growing up, people always said we were like two halves of the same whole. Where I was cautious, she was bold. Where I was studious, she was charming. I got good grades, she got attention. I followed the rules. She figured out how to bend them without getting caught. Our parents loved us equally. At least that's what they always said, but I knew even then that Claire had a certain shine that I didn't. She walked into a room, and people noticed. I walked into a room and blended into the wallpaper. I never resented her for it. That's the thing people don't understand. I loved my sister. I genuinely, deeply loved her. When she struggled with reading in elementary school, I spent hours helping her with phonics flashcards. When she got her heart broken at 16, I held her while she cried and told her she deserved better. When she dropped out of community college because she found the coursework boring, I defended her to our disappointed parents. I was her protector, her cheerleader, her safety net, and she repaid me by burning my life to the ground. I need to start at the beginning because you need to understand how complete her betrayal was. You need to understand what she took from me, and you need to understand how long it took me to even realize what was happening. When I was 26, I met a man named Daniel. He was an accountant at a firm in the city, quiet and steady and kind in a way that felt like coming home. We met at a friend's birthday party, spent the whole night talking in a corner, and by the end of the evening, I knew I wanted to see him again. We dated for 2 years before he proposed, and during that time, I introduced him to my family, my friends, my whole world, including Claire. Claire was between jobs when Daniel and I got engaged. She'd been fired from her position as a dental receptionist for, according to her, personality conflicts with the office manager. According to the office manager, she'd been caught stealing prescription pads. I believed Claire's version at the time. I always believed Claire's version of everything. Because Claire was struggling and because I wanted to help, I invited her to move in with Daniel and me temporarily. We just bought a small house together, a fixer-upper that needed work, and I thought having Claire around might even be nice. She could help with the renovations. We could have sister time. She could get back on her feet. Daniel hesitated when I suggested it. I should have paid more attention to that hesitation. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" he asked. "Your sister is a lot." "She's family," I said. "She just needs a little support right now. It won't be forever." It wasn't forever. It was 8 months. And in those 8 months, my sister systematically dismantled everything I thought I knew about my life. At first, things seemed fine. Claire helped with the painting, picked up groceries, made dinner sometimes. She and Daniel were cordial, even friendly. I remember feeling grateful that they got along, that my future husband and my sister could joke around together. What I didn't notice was how often Claire found reasons to be alone with Daniel. How she started asking him for advice on everything from car trouble to investment strategies. How she began dressing differently when she knew he'd be home. Subtle things that I dismissed as Claire just being Claire. The first real sign of trouble came about 4 months into her stay. I came home early from work with a migraine and found Claire sitting on the couch with Daniel, watching a movie. They were on opposite ends of the couch, nothing inappropriate, but something about the way they stopped talking when I walked in made my stomach clench. "You're home early," Claire said, her voice just slightly too bright. "Headache," I managed. "What are you guys watching?" "Just some action movie Daniel wanted to see," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "I was keeping him company while you worked late again." That phrase stuck with me. While you worked late again, like my job was a character flaw. Like I was somehow failing by trying to build my career. I told myself I was being paranoid. I was stressed from work, from wedding planning, from having a third person in our small house. I was seeing things that weren't there. But the things kept happening. Little comments from Claire about how Daniel seemed tense, how he probably needed more attention than I was giving him. Suggestions that maybe I was spending too much time at work, too much energy on wedding details, not enough focus on my relationship. She planted seeds of doubt so gently, so carefully, that I didn't even realize they were taking root. Then I found the texts. I wasn't snooping, I want to make that clear. Daniel had left his phone on the kitchen counter while he showered, and it buzzed with a notification. I glanced at it automatically, expecting to see a work email or a message from his fantasy football league. Instead, I saw my sister's name and a preview of the message. I can't stop thinking about last night. My hands were shaking as I picked up the phone. I told myself there was an innocent explanation. Maybe they'd watched another movie. Maybe she was talking about a conversation they'd had. Maybe it was nothing. It wasn't nothing. I scrolled through their text history and my heart shattered into so many pieces I wasn't sure it would ever be whole again. Messages going back weeks, flirtatious at first, then increasingly explicit. Plans to meet up when I was at work, declarations that they couldn't help their feelings, that they'd tried to resist, that they didn't want to hurt me, but the connection between them was too strong. Daniel had slept with my sister, in our house, while I worked overtime to pay for the wedding we were planning. I put the phone back exactly where I'd found it. I walked to the bathroom and threw up. And then I stood in front of the mirror and made a decision that would define the next 3 years of my life. I wasn't going to confront them. Not yet. First, I was going to understand exactly how deep this went. And then, I was going to make them both regret ever thinking they could get away with it. The hardest part was acting normal. Pretending I didn't know. Looking at my sister across the dinner table and smiling while my insides burned with rage and grief. Kissing Daniel goodnight while wondering if he was comparing me to her, if he was thinking about her while he held me. I started paying attention to everything, every conversation, every glance, every moment when one of them left the room. I took notes in a journal I kept hidden at work, dates, times, observations, evidence. I also started doing research. What were my options? What could I do that was legal, that wouldn't destroy my own life in the process of destroying theirs? The first thing I learned was about the house. Daniel and I had bought it together, but the down payment had come entirely from my savings. I had documentation of this, bank records showing the transfer. An attorney I consulted quietly told me that if we split, I'd have a strong claim to the majority of the property value. The second thing I learned was about Daniel's job. He worked for a prestigious accounting firm with strict ethics policies, including policies about personal conduct that might reflect poorly on the company. Having an affair with your fiancé's sister while living in her house probably qualified. The third thing I learned was about Claire. She'd applied for a job at a local nonprofit working with at-risk youth. The position required background checks and character references. She'd listed me as one of her references without asking. I didn't do anything with this information immediately. I just gathered it, organized it, waited. Meanwhile, I watched my sister charm my fiancé away from me in real time. She was so skilled at it that even knowing what was happening, I couldn't help but admire her technique. She never said anything negative about me directly. Instead, she said things like, "Rebecca works so hard. I hope she knows you appreciate her," in a tone that implied I didn't deserve appreciation. She mentioned my flaws casually, framing them as observations rather than criticisms. "Rebecca's always been so serious about everything," she'd say with a little laugh. "I guess someone in the family had to be the responsible one." She made me sound boring, uptight, the kind of woman a man might feel trapped by, and Daniel, the man I thought I knew, ate it up. 6 weeks after I found those texts, Claire came to me with tears in her eyes. She said she had something to tell me, something that was going to hurt me, but she couldn't keep lying anymore. She said she'd developed feelings for Daniel, and she thought he might have feelings for her too. She said she was so sorry, she'd never meant for it to happen, but she couldn't control her heart. She was giving me her confession, a carefully edited, self-serving version of the truth that painted her as a helpless victim of overwhelming emotion rather than the calculating predator she actually was. I could have exploded. I wanted to. Every cell in my body was screaming at me to tell her I already knew, to call her a liar, to throw her out of my house and out of my life. Instead, I took a breath, and I played the part she expected. I cried. I acted shocked. I said I needed time to process. I asked her to give me space. And then, when she left the room looking relieved that I'd taken it so well, I began phase 1 of my revenge. The first thing I did was quietly move my most important belongings out of the house. Documents, jewelry, anything irreplaceable. I rented a storage unit and made trips during my lunch breaks. I didn't want anything I valued to be caught in the crossfire when everything exploded. The second thing I did was cancel the wedding. I called every vendor personally, explained that circumstances had changed, and managed to get most of my deposits back. The wedding coordinator was sympathetic and efficient. She'd seen this before. The third thing I did was consult a real estate attorney. I explained my situation, showed her my documentation of the down payment, and asked about my options. She confirmed what I'd suspected. I could force a sale of the property or buy Daniel out, and given my financial contribution, the split would favor me significantly. I did all of this quietly, methodically, without raising any alarms. Daniel thought we were still engaged. Claire thought I was processing my feelings. My parents had no idea anything was wrong. And then I made my move. It was a Thursday evening. Daniel and Claire were both home, expecting a normal night. I came back from work with a folder full of documents and an expression I'm sure they'd never seen on my face before. "We need to talk," I said, "all three of us." They exchanged a glance. I saw fear flicker in Claire's eyes, replaced quickly by the innocent confusion she'd practiced her whole life. "What's going on?" Daniel asked. I sat down across from them and opened the folder. "I know everything," I said calmly. "I've known for 6 weeks. I have the texts, the hotel receipts, the photos from the parking garage where you thought nobody was watching. I have timestamps and dates and evidence of every single lie you've both told me." Claire's face went white. Daniel's mouth opened and closed without any sound coming out. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "Daniel, you're going to sign these papers acknowledging that the down payment on this house came from my savings alone. You're going to agree to a buyout at 30% of current market value. You're going to pack your things and be out by the end of the weekend." "Rebecca, let me explain," he started. "I'm not finished." My voice didn't shake. I was proud of that. "Claire, you're going to move out today. I've already packed your things. They're in the trunk of my car. You can collect them from the parking lot of the grocery store on 5th Street. If you try to come back to this house, I'll call the police." "You can't just—" "I can, and I will. Because here's the part you're really not going to like." I pulled out 2 more documents from the folder. "Daniel, this is a formal complaint I've drafted for your company's ethics board. The details of your affair, the evidence I've collected, all of it. I haven't submitted it yet. Whether I do depends entirely on how cooperative you are in the next 72 hours. Daniel looked like he was going to be sick. "And Claire," I turned to my sister, who was trembling now, her perfect mask starting to crack. "This is a letter to the director of the youth nonprofit where you've applied for a job. It details your theft of prescription pads from your previous employer, complete with the internal report they filed. I also haven't sent this one yet. But I will if you don't disappear from my life completely and immediately." Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Then Claire laughed. It was a hollow, desperate sound. "You're bluffing. You wouldn't actually—" "Try me." She stopped laughing. Daniel signed the papers that night. He didn't even try to negotiate. I think he realized that I wasn't the pushover he'd thought I was, that I'd been playing a role, and he'd never seen the real me underneath. Claire collected her things from the grocery store parking lot. She tried to call me 17 times in the following week. I blocked her number after the 3rd voicemail, which progressed from pleading to threatening. I thought that was the end of it. I really did. I thought I'd won, that I'd protected myself, that I'd extracted what justice I could, and was ready to move on with my life. I was so naive. What I didn't account for was that Claire had spent her entire life avoiding consequences. She was an expert at wriggling out of situations, at manipulating perception, at making herself the victim. Losing to me wasn't something she was prepared to accept. 2 weeks after I threw her out, my mother called me in tears. "Rebecca, how could you?" she sobbed. "How could you do this to your sister? My stomach dropped. Mom, what are you talking about? Claire told us everything. About how you found out she had feelings for Daniel and went crazy. About the threats you made. The way you destroyed her reputation. The lies you told about her stealing from her old job. She's devastated. She's staying with us because she has nowhere else to go, and she's been crying for days. I couldn't breathe. Claire had gotten to my parents first. She'd spun the entire situation, made herself the victim, made me the villain. And my parents, who had always been just a little bit more charmed by their younger daughter, had believed her. Mom, that's not what happened, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. Claire was having an affair with Daniel, in my house, for months. She told us you'd say that. She said you're so jealous of her that you made up this whole story. Rebecca, I love you, but you've always been competitive with Claire. Maybe you saw something you misinterpreted and you overreacted. I felt like I was falling. My own mother didn't believe me. I have evidence, I said desperately. I have texts, photos. Anyone can fake things these days. Claire said you've always been good with technology. I hung up. I had to. I was shaking so badly I couldn't hold the phone. My parents didn't speak to me for 2 months. Claire lived with them during that time, playing the wounded innocent, poisoning them against me with every conversation. She told them I'd always been jealous of her looks, her personality, her way with people. She told them I'd snapped under the pressure of wedding planning and invented the affair as an excuse to get rid of Daniel when I got cold feet. The truly insidious thing was that she wove just enough truth into her lies to make them believable. I was serious where she was fun. I did work long hours. I had always been the responsible one, the one who followed rules while she lived freely. She used my strengths as evidence of my dysfunction. I spiraled during those months. I questioned everything. Had I overreacted? Was I the villain in this story? Maybe I'd misread the texts. Maybe there was an explanation I hadn't considered. Maybe I was the crazy one. Therapy saved me. A wonderful woman named Dr. Hernandez helped me see that I was experiencing gaslighting, that my sister was a master manipulator, that my instincts and my evidence were valid. She helped me understand that what Claire had done was a pattern, not an aberration, and that I needed to document everything moving forward. So that's what I did. I started keeping records of every interaction, every phone call from family members, asking why I couldn't just forgive and move on. Every social media post where Claire painted herself as the wronged party. I built a timeline of her manipulations going back years, finding patterns I'd been too close to see before. And I started digging deeper into Claire's past. It turns out my sister had a history I knew nothing about. The prescription pad theft wasn't her first offense. She'd been fired from 3 jobs for various forms of dishonesty, and each time she'd convinced everyone that she was the victim. She'd borrowed money from friends and never paid it back, but when confronted, she'd cry and claim misunderstandings. She'd ruined at least 2 other relationships by pursuing attached men, always framing herself as the innocent party who'd simply fallen in love. I wasn't her first victim, I was just the first one who fought back. The knowledge gave me strength, it also gave me ammunition. Phase 2 of my revenge took longer to execute. I needed to be patient, to wait for the right opportunities, to let Claire believe she'd won. She got the nonprofit job, eventually. Not the one I'd known about, but a similar position at a different organization. She was working with troubled teenagers, which horrified me given what I now knew about her character. But I filed that information away for later. She also started dating, first a coworker, then a personal trainer, then a man she met through a church group she joined as part of her rehabilitation of image. Poor guy had no idea what he was getting into. Meanwhile, I rebuilt my life. I finished renovating the house, this time to my own tastes rather than what Daniel had wanted. I got promoted at work. I made new friends who had no connection to my sister or my past. I started running, which became my therapy and my meditation, the time when I could process everything and plan my next moves. The opportunity came about 18 months after the initial confrontation. My mother had reached out tentatively. She missed me, she said. She wanted to find a way back to a relationship. I was wary, but I agreed to meet her for lunch. What she told me changed everything. I've been having doubts, she admitted, looking older than I remembered. about what really happened with you and Claire. Things don't add up. What do you mean? Little things. Stories she tells that contradict each other. Money that goes missing from my purse when she's been visiting. And last month I found her going through your father's desk looking at his investment statements. When I asked her about it, she said she was just curious, but my mother trailed off, looking at her hands. She's been borrowing money from us. A lot of money. She says she's paying off debt from a credit card that got stolen and misused, but Rebecca, I'm starting to wonder. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt sad. My mother was finally seeing what I'd always seen, and it had taken financial loss for her to open her eyes. I have documentation, I said carefully, of what really happened with Daniel, if you want to see it. She did. And when she saw the texts, the photos, the timeline of deception, she cried, she apologized. She held my hands and told me she was sorry for not believing me, for choosing to believe the easier story rather than the truth. It was a start, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. My mother and I developed a plan together. We started paying closer attention to Claire's behavior, documenting inconsistencies, tracking the money she was extracting from our parents under various pretexts. We discovered she'd taken nearly $30,000 over the past year, always with different explanations that fell apart under scrutiny. We also discovered something more disturbing. Claire had been using our father's social security number to apply for credit cards. 3 of them, all maxed out, all in collections, identity theft, of our own father. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. The crime that couldn't be explained away or spun into a victimhood narrative. The violation that was clearly, unambiguously illegal. But I didn't act immediately. I'd learned patience. I needed Claire to dig herself deeper, to leave no possibility of escape. I waited until she was engaged. The boyfriend from the church group proposed after about a year of dating. His name was Marcus, and from what I could tell, he was a genuinely good person who had no idea who he was planning to marry. He came from money, which I'm sure was part of Claire's attraction. He also had a large, close-knit family who adored Claire and were planning an elaborate wedding. I felt sorry for him, but I felt sorrier for myself and for everyone Claire had hurt over the years. The engagement party was at Marcus's parents' house, a beautiful estate outside the city. I wasn't invited, of course. Claire had told everyone that I was estranged due to mental health issues, that I'd made up stories about her and couldn't be trusted. But Marcus's sister had become Facebook friends with me through a mutual connection. She had no idea about the family drama. And when I reached out to say congratulations and ask if I could send a gift to the party, she gave me the date and address. I showed up with 3 years of documentation and a calm smile. The look on Claire's face when she saw me walk in was worth every sleepless night, every tear, every moment of doubt, pure, unadulterated terror. "Rebecca," she managed, "what are you doing here?" "I came to give you my blessing," I said sweetly, "and to meet your fiancé's family. They seem so lovely. I'm sure they'd love to know more about you." Claire grabbed my arm and pulled me toward a side room. "What do you want? Money? I can get you money." "I don't want your money. I want you to admit what you did. To me, to our parents, to everyone you've lied to." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're delusional. Nobody believes you. Nobody will ever believe you. Are you sure about that?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the folder of evidence. Not just the affair, but the identity theft, the credit cards in our father's name, the bank statements showing she'd been hiding money from Marcus, money extracted from our parents under false pretenses, the emails to her old co-worker at the dental office arranging the theft of prescription pads. I'd spent 3 years building this case. Every lie, every theft, every manipulation, all of it, documented and organized. Claire's face went gray. "If you show that to anyone, I'll tell them you faked it. I'll tell them you're obsessed with destroying me." "You could try, but I don't think it'll work, because I'm not the only one who's going to be telling this story." I explained that our mother was outside, ready to speak to Marcus's parents about the financial exploitation, that our father had filed a police report about the identity theft, that 2 of Claire's former colleagues had agreed to provide statements about her history of theft and deception. You built a house of cards, I told her, and tonight, it all comes down. What happened next was chaotic and emotional and deeply satisfying. My mother spoke to Marcus's parents. She showed them the evidence of Claire's financial exploitation. She cried as she explained how her younger daughter had stolen their identity and their money. Marcus's parents confronted Claire. She tried to spin it, of course, tried to cry her way out of it, tried to claim misunderstandings and jealous family members and elaborate conspiracies. But the evidence was too comprehensive. The police report about the identity theft was too official. The pattern was too clear. Marcus called off the engagement that night. His parents offered sincere apologies to mine. And Claire, for the first time in her life, found herself in a situation she couldn't charm or manipulate her way out of. The legal consequences followed. Our father pressed charges for the identity theft. Claire eventually pleaded guilty to avoid trial, receiving probation and mandatory restitution. The conviction was public record, destroying the carefully cultivated image she'd built. She lost her job at the nonprofit. When your position involves working with vulnerable youth and you have a conviction for stealing from your own father, organizations tend to distance themselves quickly. Her co-workers who had adored her suddenly remembered red flags they'd previously ignored. Her friends disappeared one by one. Each of them, when they learned the full story, remembered times when Claire had behaved oddly, when money had gone missing, when stories hadn't added up. My evidence gave them permission to trust their instincts, to acknowledge what they'd always known on some level. Even Marcus, who had genuinely loved her, couldn't look past what he'd learned. He told mutual friends that he felt like he'd been in a relationship with a stranger, that the woman he'd proposed to had never actually existed. Claire moved to another state. Last I heard, she was working at a call center, living in a one-bedroom apartment, starting over with nothing. Part of me felt sorry for her. She was still my sister, still the person I'd read stories to as a child, still the girl who'd once told me I was her best friend in the whole world. But then I remembered all the people she'd hurt, all the money she'd stolen, all the lives she'd damaged with her lies, and I felt at peace with what I'd done. I thought that was the end of the story. For about a year, it was. Then Claire reached out. It was an email, sent from an account I didn't recognize. The subject line just said, "Please read." The message was long. It was an apology, or what passed for one. Claire acknowledged what she'd done, admitted she'd been wrong, said she'd started therapy, and was working on understanding why she'd lived the way she had. She said she didn't expect forgiveness, but she wanted me to know she was trying to be different. I didn't respond for weeks. I didn't know how to. Part of me wanted to believe she was sincere. Part of me was certain this was just another manipulation, another attempt to work her way back into a position where she could hurt me again. I forwarded the email to Dr. Hernandez, who helped me analyze it for red flags. There were some concerning phrases, some classic manipulation tactics embedded in the apology. But there were also signs of genuine self-awareness, acknowledgments of specific harm rather than vague generalizations. It's possible she's genuinely working on change, Dr. Hernandez said. It's also possible this is a long game. You don't have to decide right now. You don't have to respond at all. The choice is entirely yours. I thought about it for months, and eventually I wrote back. I told Claire that I'd received her email, that I wasn't ready to forgive her and might never be, but that if she was genuinely committed to change, I wished her well in that process. I told her not to contact me again unless I reached out first. She respected that boundary. It's been 2 years since that exchange, and I haven't heard from her. Our parents have limited contact with her, supervised and careful. The family dinners of my childhood are gone forever, but there's a kind of peace that's replaced them. I'm married now. Not to Daniel, obviously. To a man named James, who I met through work 3 years after everything fell apart. He knows my whole story, including what I did to get revenge. He told me he would have done the same thing, that he admired my patience and my strategy. That reaction told me a lot about his character. We have a daughter. She's 14 months old, with her father's smile and my stubbornness. When I look at her, I think about what kind of woman I want to raise. I want her to be kind, but I also want her to recognize when kindness is being exploited. I want her to love her family, but I also want her to know that blood doesn't excuse everything. I want her to believe in second chances, but also to understand that some people don't deserve them. I want her to be stronger than I was. And if anyone ever tries to use her love against her, I want her to know that she has the power to fight back. Sometimes people ask me if I regret what I did. The documentation, the exposure, the systematic dismantling of my sister's life. They ask if I feel guilty for how far I went, for the thoroughness of my revenge. I don't. Claire knew exactly what she was doing when she pursued my fiancé. She knew what she was doing when she stole from our parents. She knew what she was doing when she stole our father's identity. She made choices, deliberate and calculated choices, and she deserved to face consequences for those choices. For most of her life, she'd escaped those consequences. She'd charmed her way out of every situation, convinced every victim that they were the problem, walked away from the wreckage she created without a scratch. I made sure that pattern ended. I made sure, for once, that her actions had results she couldn't escape or explain away. That's not cruelty, that's justice. The hardest part, looking back, was the loss of the sister I thought I had. The person who held my hand during scary movies, who I whispered secrets to in the dark of our shared bedroom, who I genuinely believed would have my back forever. That person, I realized eventually, had never existed. She was a role Claire played, a mask she wore, a performance designed to secure my loyalty and trust so she could exploit it later. Grieving that loss took years. Therapy helped, time helped. Building a new life with people who genuinely loved me helped. But I still have moments, even now, when I see sisters laughing together or helping each other through hard times, and I feel a pang of what might have been, what should have been. Then I remind myself that I'm not the one who destroyed that possibility. Claire made her choices. I just made sure she couldn't pretend otherwise. To anyone listening who's been through something similar, who's been betrayed by someone they thought they could trust completely, I want you to know that it's possible to survive it. It's possible to come out the other side stronger. It's possible to build something beautiful from the ashes of what was destroyed. But I also want you to know that it's okay to fight back. It's okay to refuse to be a victim. It's okay to use your intelligence, your patience, your resources to ensure that the person who hurt you faces consequences. We're taught, especially as women, to be forgiving, to be the bigger person, to let things go, and sometimes that's the right choice. But sometimes the right choice is to stand your ground, to refuse to be erased, to make sure the truth is known even when it's uncomfortable. Claire knew my weaknesses. She knew I was loyal to a fault, trusting to the point of blindness, so desperate for family connection that I'd overlook almost anything. She used that knowledge to take advantage of me for years, taking and taking while I made excuses for her behavior. But she underestimated me. She thought my kindness was weakness. She thought my patience meant I'd never fight back. She thought she could destroy my life and walk away without consequences, the same way she'd always done. She was wrong. I'm not the same person I was 3 years ago. I'm harder now, more careful, slower to trust. Some people might see that as damage, as evidence that Claire's betrayal changed me for the worse. I see it as wisdom, as protection, as the armor I've built to ensure that no one ever uses my love against me again. My daughter will grow up knowing her aunt exists, but not knowing her. She'll hear the story eventually, when she's old enough to understand it. And I hope the lesson she takes from it isn't that family can't be trusted, but that trust must be earned and maintained, that love doesn't mean tolerance of abuse, that even the closest relationships have limits. I hope she never needs that lesson, but if she does, I'll make sure she knows how to fight. Claire thought she knew my weaknesses, and she did for a while. She used them to try to take everything from me. But here's what she didn't know. My weaknesses were also my strengths. My loyalty meant I'd fight for what was mine. My attention to detail meant I could build an airtight case. My patience meant I could wait years for the right moment. She thought she was the smart one, the charming one, the one who always won. She was wrong about that too. I won, not just the immediate battle, but the war. I have a husband who loves me, a daughter who fills my life with joy, a career I'm proud of, a relationship with my parents that's healing more every day. Claire has a criminal record, a destroyed reputation, and a lonely apartment in a city where nobody knows her name. That's not karma, that's consequences. Consequences I ensured she couldn't escape. Some people might read this story and think I went too far, that I should have just walked away, moved on, let the universe handle it. But the universe doesn't always handle it. Sometimes people get away with terrible things. Sometimes the charming manipulators of the world skate through life, leaving wreckage behind them, never facing any consequences for the harm they cause. I decided that wasn't going to happen in my story. I decided to be the consequence, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. So that's my story. The story of how my sister tried to use my love against me, and how I spent 3 years making sure she paid for it. The story of betrayal and patience, and the kind of revenge that doesn't just feel good in the moment, but actually changes things. If you're out there feeling powerless against someone who's hurt you, know that you have more power than you think. You have your intelligence, your patience, your ability to document and plan and wait for the right moment. You have the truth on your side, even when it feels like no one believes you. And you have this, the knowledge that sometimes the nice girl finishes last, but the smart girl, the one who pays attention and plays the long game, she wins. I know I did.